my tongue. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and man, I hope you can hear it in my voice. I finally feel like a fucking human being again, okay? I am not sick. I am not dying of allergies. I am well rested. It is a whole new day over here in the studio. There's a full human being coming to you from this microphone or looking into this camera if you are watching the video version of the podcast. We're here, man. First time in 2024 we have arrived as a full human being, it feels like. Or at least the first time in a long time. So I'm incredibly excited to just feel good. My dog is just doing his thing right now. If you hear some background noise, he's rolling around the carpet. He's excited. We're just ready to go for today's episode. And I've been meaning to do this episode for a minute now, talking about self-help and what it's become. Okay? And if you follow me on social media, you might have seen a video I had posted about Jay Shetty and this article from The Guardian that came out, sort of, I don't want to say exposing him, but definitely kind of pointing out how many of his claims, his credentials he stretched the truth just a little bit on his story and may have stolen some content. We'll get into all that. But to me, it kind of brought up a larger conversation that I've been having, with people in my life behind the scenes. I think some of the members of the Just Be Social Club, we've had conversations about this as well. And it's just sort of, I think, a sign of the times where something like self-help is big business, where it is content that gets a lot of engagement and follows. And, a lot of these self-help gurus, Jay Shetty being one of them, are people who have now become celebrities in their own right. And it's an interesting time period, and I think it's an age-old case study of what happens when you mix celebrity, fame, and money, how it begins to dilute something that at one point started in a positive place. It began with the intention of helping people and really had a pure intention, and then began to get watered down by fame and money. I mean, that's an age-old story, right? And I'm not disregarding or dismissing the entire self-help industry as a whole or its ability to, for lack of better words, help people, right? I've been, changed in a profound way because of self-help content and books and programs and things like that. I think there's a lot of value. But you also have to sort of be wary of people and also apply a bit of your critical thinking to say, okay, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. Kind of being able to take from it what you can, right, or what makes sense for you, and leave the other stuff behind. And I think a lot of us are kind of really, I think, missing some of the deeper meanings in self-help as well, or the deeper work that is needed. I think a lot of people get fed this sort of McDonald's version and don't understand all of the work that truly needs to go on if you want this information to actually have a profound impact on your life and not sort of just make you feel good in the moment type of thing, right? So just a larger conversation around self-help, the toxic entrepreneur bro culture that it's also sort of invited in as well. We're going to touch on a few different things, but I just wanted to have this conversation, especially as somebody who I guess is to a degree known for putting out inspirational content. I'm very weary of calling my content self-help or, even with Just Be, my quote-unquote wellness brand, we call we say we're not your mother's wellness brand, right? We want to distinguish ourselves from the norm because I think the norm has failed the vast majority of people, and the norm has also left particularly our community and communities of color out of the conversation because there has been this sort of caste system, and the figures that have been propped up in said system don't look like you or I. And we'll kind of get into all that. So I wanted to just give you a preface as to what we're talking about on today's show. So I'm excited to bring you, like, I guess the first sort of solo deep dive of the season, selfishly. And this is me just, as I love to typically do, get some shit off my chest using the podcast and hopefully, I don't know, be of service in doing so as well. So that's what we're doing on today's show. So without further ado, let's first and foremost just dive into this Jay Shetty thing, self-help as a whole. Let's just talk about it. And we'll do a deep dive, as we always do, in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
All right, so I want to start with this Jay Shetty article from The Guardian. I think that's just like a good launching place because, again, I've been having these types of conversations, behind closed doors or with the members of our Just Be Social Club. I think I've used the word snake oil salesman to describe a lot of the people in this industry. I've even been trying to say for me, I consider myself to be a self-help dude for people who hate self-help dudes, basically. I'm really just on my journey and I'm documenting it and I'm sharing information, and a lot of it tends to be self-help because I'm growth oriented, right? But that's sort of my intention. And for me, self-help has been such a game changer, and something I discovered, I think late teens, early 20s, and really, I think, kind of helped me out a lot in a dark period of my life. And we'll kind of get into that in the Mi Gente segment. But I personally have an investment in this sort of content, this industry, the idea of it. And that's what frustrates me when I hear particular stories. And we'll start again with this Jay Shetty one, where The Guardian wrote kind of a expose, if you will. It's not like, I don't know, man, it's not a hit piece, and it's not like I guess you're exposing to a degree, but it's not like he has some egregious, history or something like that. But I think it is worth noting and worth talking about. So it's called Uncovering the Higher Truth of Jay Shetty. I'll link to it in the show notes. But essentially, throughout the course of the article, they go into moments where he's exaggerated much of his story, or I guess his story as a whole has been exaggerated, right? Jay Shetty is known as the dude who was a monk and allegedly lived in solitude and disconnected from the world, and then decided, I need to go out and share this information with mainstream culture. I left the monkhood and jumped right back into normal life type of thing. What they say in this article is, though, that much of Shetty's spiritual education took place not in India, but in Watford, in orbital, I don't know what the hell that word is, orbital town outside of northwest London. I don't know what what they mean by orbital. Maybe it's like a commuter town is what they would call it, where I'm from. But right outside of northwest London, they're saying that his claims of going to India, living in, I believe it's called a monastery, it's amongst the monks in silence, they're saying that was fabricated. He visited India but didn't stay out there for an extended period of time, and most of his work was done in India. While he would make these claims of sort of being disconnected from technology, the world, didn't speak. I think he even talked about being depressed at one point when he sort of came back into the real world and had to readjust. They're saying that was a lie. He was actually posting content on YouTube at the time, I believe, while quote unquote in his sort of monkhood days. So he wasn't really disconnected from the world. He had plenty of access to technology and was using the internet and started to build his personal brand while he was supposedly this monk in silence or whatever, right? Now, some of the more kind of gross claims are that he was actually also stealing people's content. And I did see on TikTok, there were people going hard when this first came out, was side-by-side comparisons, and it was him regurgitating other people's content and not crediting and kind of claiming it as his own original content, be it quotes, be it sort of observations about the world. He was posting these things as if they were his. And throughout the course of the article, what's also interesting to me, Jay Shetty's lawyers are refute certain claims and things like that within the article. But what the article does is it actually references like specific links or specific pieces of content, and then shows that it was taken down after the Guardian, reached out to Jay Shetty, or after the Guardian had posted about it. Like, those links are being scrubbed from the internet, basically. So if you got nothing to hide, why are you scrubbing shit? Like, that's first and foremost, rule 101 here. If you are not cheating, why are you deleting text messages type shit, right? It's just like, it's obvious. You try to hide something here, right? That is sort of, to me, I look at that and, okay, this is a person who was sort of very much intentionally trying to build a personal brand, which, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. And as we sort of like fast forward to where he is now, it's like, oh, he really like wanted to be a celebrity. And this self-help lane was his route to being a celebrity. And you kind of see it. He was the person who, not like the preacher, but like he did J-Lo and Ben Affleck's wedding. He was the one who married them. And I don't know, man. To each their own, but like stuff like that, it's like, what do you? Listen. I'm trying to like put myself in, I don't know if it's his shoes or whatever. I just think this is my whole thing. And I'm going to be kind of bouncing around as I have these like thoughts. But my whole thing is this. This isn't like you're an actor, you're creating entertainment, or even a musician creating entertainment, right? And you're just a content creator who creates something of entertainment value. Yeah, like there's going to be celebrity, there's going to be fame that comes along with it. That's a part of it. And while I think celebrity and fame are nothing to be overvalued, I get it. Certain people want to be famous and they find their avenue for being famous. My gripe with that, in a real sense, when it comes to self-help, is you're doing so at the expense of other people's trauma, right? Like, I don't want my trauma or my depression, my need for help and information to be your get rich quick scheme. I don't know why that took me so long to get out. And I'm going to keep it real. We're not going to edit that out on the podcast. We're going to keep it raw here. I don't want my trauma to be your get rich quick scheme. I don't know why that's a mouthful. And that's I think where we begin to enter this gray area, right? Because listen, he's allowed to create his personal brand. He's allowed to want to be a fucking celebrity. If that's what he wants, cool. But it feels a bit dirty when it's done on the backs of people who are trying to find meaning in their life or trying to get through a particularly difficult moment in their life. And I think when your intention, and again, I'm not in his head, but from the outside looking in, seems like your intention was to go viral, was to be famous, was to be amongst celebrities, because pretty much, from what I see on the internet, I used to casually listen to this podcast. I haven't in a while, but he interviews a lot of random fucking celebrities. Like, once it crossed into like interviewing the Kardashians, it's kind of like, what are you really trying to do here? And I understand, to play devil's advocate, one argument could be made that the Kardashians have an audience that now is going to be exposed to somebody who is potentially, giving out self-help information, that there's value in that. Sure. And to that degree, I think somebody like Jay Shetty does have value in that. But I think for me, not as the casual self-help enthusiast, but as somebody who truly wants to create profound change in their life and wants profound change and healing for the world, I do have to side-eye a little bit when I see him in general and kind of just see the celebrity approach to it. Yeah, it's going to be one of those things where it's somewhat hypocritical, I think, at times for me with, maybe my lifestyle or whatever it might be. But I think there's a line, like for me, and not to make this all about me, but for me, because I'm trying to like work it out in my head of like where I think we begin to deviate, where we begin to go wrong, right? Like for me, when getting into inspiring people, and I've always been doing those things and wanting to help people. I've done that before. I had a platform to do it. I can remember, even in my 20s, I had a record label and lifestyle brand, but like it was very much in line with this kind of stuff where I was like really trying to be somebody who brought others together, brought community, other creatives, and to inspire them to not give up, to keep working, you know. And that was something I was doing on a small level in New Jersey and New York, you know. But I think for me, how I rationalize it all in my head, the inspirational content or the self-help, the wellness, those kinds of things, like I'm not looking at that as my main business or my main source of income, right? I'm just looking at it as a part of my duty, and more than just duty, a blessing that I've gotten to do the things that I love to do for a living, and I want to, in some way, somehow, share that immense amount of love and happiness that I feel doing those things. I want to share it with other people and try and inspire them to recreate it in their own way. At the same time, I've also been through some shit, and I know I felt so alone for so long, and I want to let people know you're not alone in your suffering or your hardships or your experiences, right? Now, of course, I've gotten paid to do speaking engagements, right? The Just Be Social Club has a paid aspect of it because, of course, our time, energy, and literal investments that we've made into it all come at a cost. But I'm not doing it with the intention of like, this is my one big business idea. This is my pathway to fame. This is where celebrity's coming into play. And that, I think, is this sort of difference. And we'll talk about like pricing and things like that because, like, you know, for me, it's like, how do I make this as accessible as possible while not spreading myself too thin, right? So we'll get into that because that's kind of one of the next thing I'll talk about when it comes to money and things like that. But I think when I see people like Jay Shetty, or even like somebody like Lewis Howes, I've said this a bunch behind the scenes, and I've kind of been like, I don't want to sound like a hater, but like they create these stories as a means to be the vehicle to sell you on why you should spend your money with them. Like their business is in the business of selling people hope or dreams or whatever, right? Like Lewis Howes, you know, former pro athlete turned lifestyle entrepreneur. What is a lifestyle entrepreneur? Meaning, you just make up random shit and sell it to people. You give them, you know, this regurgitated information, package it, and sell it to them. That's literally what your business model has been. You didn't know what type of business you want to start, and you started a self-help business. And that's what I mean, where it's like, when you started, you know, with the intention of selling people self-help, rather than you just sort of began living life, and by proxy, people began to be drawn to you because you were just trying to put good energy out there and share game and things like that. And then from there, you're like, okay, I have to be compensated for my time in some sort of way. How do I find the healthy balance? To me, that's a more admirable pathway. But these people, when you look at it, you know, Jay Shetty included, because when they talk about the content stuff, you know, he was very much obviously trying to create this brand and then be able to profit off of it while stealing people's content, which is like the scary part. And he was also, he was apparently using like interns from one of the religious groups like that he was affiliated with, and like telling them that this was work for the religious group, when in reality it was really just work for his personal brand. There's a few different things in that story that you're kind of just like, yeah, it feels a little dirty. But there's a gray area. I hope I'm clearly getting to that gray area of what it means. Right? When your intention is solely like, this is your next big business idea, that's when it's dirty, I think. And that is what I think a lot of people are doing in today's current day and age. And also even just for likes and follows, right? That's I think it's the same type of shit. And self-help is big business, right? And that also rubs me the wrong way a bit. I have numbers here where they say the market size for self-help globally in 2023 was $41.2 billion. So it's a $41.2 billion industry globally. In 2032, they're projecting that the market size, it's going to be an $81.6 billion industry. So it's only growing. It's only becoming more profitable. And I think what happens with that, it begins to become profitable at the expense of the people who need it most. And it becomes inaccessible to those who need it most. And that's what I'm fearful of as well. Because you have somebody like Tony Robbins, right? And I was just kind of digging around a little bit. Tony Robbins is like one of the bigger self-help people in the world, right? He's been that way forever. He used to even have fucking CDs that are like motivational CDs. That's how long he's been doing this for. But apparently, from what I could find on the interwebs, he charges anywhere from $2,500 to $10K to hear him speak at a seminar. And allegedly, there's also a platinum ticket that is $70,000, which, if I'm not mistaken, gets you access, I think, to all the seminars. So you can travel around and become a Robbins head, kind of like the Deadheads follow them around in concert. Bro, this is a lot of fucking money. $2,500 is still a lot to just sit in a conference room for a day or two amongst thousands of other people just to hear him speak. $10K obviously is a hell of a lot of money as well. $70K, wild. And I think what's interesting about these numbers, and I'm not trying to shame anybody who's invested in themselves and done these things. I'll get to how I've done the same thing. I've spent thousands of dollars on a particular program. What I've recognized, though, is this becomes a caste system. The haves and the have-nots. And I think it's also why you don't see many people who look like you and I. And I'm talking about traditionally. I know social media has kind of helped this a lot, but traditionally, it's why you don't see people who look like you and I in the world of self-help. Because many of us didn't grow up with an expendable $10,000 to spend a ticket to hear some man speak. Even if the information is great, there's been mixed reviews I've seen online. I've also heard from personal people that it was life-changing, sure. But again, when you're charging that much money, those who are really down and out are not going to get this information. And again, I think that's why our community has been left out of the conversation for so long. That's sort of, I feel like, part of my life's work in what I'm doing with Just Be is I've been fortunate enough to discover a lot of really valuable information at an early age and gone through a lot of the work of applying it, still continue to go through the work. And I think I'm good at articulating it in a way that maybe speaks to people who normally wouldn't get that information. I always say my greatest gift is observation, awareness, and then the ability to articulate. That's my talent in this life, my God-given talent, I think, is that. But I'm doing it with a genuine purpose in mind. And I would, and quote me on this, in 10 years, when this is the biggest podcast in the world, I don't want to be charging people $10,000 a ticket to come hear me speak at a seminar. That still sounds crazy to me. To me, the people who have the $10,000, and this is excluding those who take out loans because there's stories about that. There are people who go into debt, take money out of their pension to go and attend these things. I believe there's even, from what I've heard, I don't know Tony Robbins specifically, I've heard of different ones where they even have, because they'll upsell you at the end of it, like, oh, you got to join this next program, you got to level up, and this one's extra money. And they'll have like credit card companies right there that are going to give you a credit card so you get into credit card debt to join their next program. It's like a pyramid scheme, basically. But again, anybody who didn't have to go into massive amounts of debt for this, they are already in a privileged position where they can spend thousands of dollars to sit in a room for a day. Most of us can't do that. Most of us didn't grow up being able to do that. And for me, I would never be able to, in good conscience, just cater to that audience. That's for me. Because I know I have people follow me or people I'm cool with that run different programs, coaching programs, whatever, to each their own. For me, where I stand, that's where I'm at. Even if I could get away with charging $10K a ticket, it wouldn't feel right to me. But again, Tony Robbins has made self-help his entire business model, essentially, right? And for me, that's why I would never make self-help my entire thing, because then to me it waters it all down, because then it's like, fuck, I have to now turn this into an incredibly profitable business in order for me to live the life I want to live. For me, I don't want to put that pressure on this, because I want to keep it as pure as possible. And I think that is the sort of line, the fine line that has to be walked here. When this is your core business, you're inevitably going to have to become a shrewd business person in some sort of way, charging people $10,000 a ticket, essentially. And again, that creates this caste system. Those of us who can't afford that aren't getting access to the information, because these are, and you know, the information is obviously out there for anybody who wants it, right? Let's play devil's advocate. Let's play both sides of the fence here, because other people would be like, well, you could just go online and find these things. You're absolutely right. But there is something different when you have a more intimate access to ask questions, when you're in a room full of other like-minded people, right? I've noticed that in the masterminds that we do. It's a different type of energy, right? And there's a value in that. I'm not taking away the value of any of these programs or things like that. But again, it comes down to access. And for me, access is more important than anything else when it comes to this type of work. The access is what I'm like, for me, like why I post on social media and things like that. It's like, I'm trying to just give people game, you know? And I want as many people as possible to potentially be able to access that. I want to share with you all that I've been learning. And I think that's what is important. And yeah, I know I'm losing my train of thought over here, because it's just like, it's such a fine fucking line between, I feel like, becoming a snake oil salesman and getting compensated for your time. Because I genuinely do believe you should be compensated for your time. All of our time is valuable. But again, when you're charging $10,000 or this $70,000 platinum ticket, you're taking advantage of people's trauma at the end of the day. I think it's just a moment to stop now or reflect a little bit when we're having these conversations on check credentials, right? And this is actually in the literal sense. I always say check credentials when it comes to people like giving you, opinions, but check credentials in sort of the literal sense here of like, you have somebody like Jay Shetty sort of selling you on this false narrative, this false reason why he's a person of authority. And I don't know Tony Robbins' background personally. I know he's got, a struggle story that's very similar to many of the people in his industry. I think when you get propped up in that way of like, okay, I'm the guru, I also take issue in that. Because what I've learned, and maybe I just suck at self-help, or maybe I am just chronically depressed beyond what these people are, or maybe I've experienced trauma beyond what these guys have experienced. So maybe I'm just fucked up here and broken, right? But for me, I've been doing work since my 20s, and we're talking about a decade plus at this point of just being heavily invested in personal growth and work. And I'm still figuring this shit out day by day. I'm not a fucking guru. I've read a ton of books, listened to the podcast, I've gone to programs, I've done the work, I've gone to therapy for years and years and years. I'm still figuring this out. I'm still fucking up every single day. I would never feel comfortable being called a guru or being propped up as somebody who has it all figured out. I'm literally just telling you what I learned today, how it worked for me, and I'm sharing that. I'm also telling you, I fucking feel like shit today. I feel depressed. This is just part of the process. And like, that's transparency, that's honesty at the end of the day, right? That's just me being authentic. I'm not asking you to prop me up as anything special. But a lot of these guys, the way they come off is as if they have it all figured out. And I know at times they'll have moments where they talk about, like, I was fighting with my wife and I discovered this, blah, blah. Okay, cool. The thing that bothers me so much about a lot of these things and like a lot of the podcast conversations they have, these people talk as if there is a finish line. They talk as if the thing that they have figured out, they figured it out, and then they never had another fucking issue, a day in their life. That's what bothers me. Like like Mel Robbins, and I'm fucking like taking shots out here. People are catching strays left and right over here in the self-help world. I'm like the 50 Cent of the self-help world when he was just going at rappers early in his career. I don't want to be that way. I'm just having an honest conversation with no filter. I like I've read Mel Robbins' book. It was a lot of fluff, but it was interesting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 rule. She's that lady where you're like, if you're like stuck, you're like frozen, you're like in bed, depressed, count to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then just get off, get out of bed basically, like a rocket ship taking off, right? And honestly, I applied that for a little bit. It helped. Then my mind got tired of it and outgrew it and it stopped working. But when you hear somebody like her talk, it's like, I fucking did this and now my life is perfect. I have figured out this thing called life. And it's like, bro, this is never ending. That worked for a year. Now what? Again, I'm like generalizing here. I'm picking on people for the sake of example. But it's this never-ending work. And I'm not saying it's never-ending work where I'm like, the work never ends. Sign up for our, fucking platinum package now. Like that, like this is what I'm fucking knocking my microphone over here if you're here on camera. I'm getting real, I don't know, I'm annoyed by the way things are to a degree. I'm really becoming my dad, like a grumpy old man now. But what I'm saying is like this air of perfection and elitism that comes from a lot of these people. And again, that's me reading into it, me having my own lens by which I view things. Maybe I'm part of the problem. I don't know. Maybe you don't see it that way, and that's fine. But I can't help but look at a lot of these people in this world and this feeling of elitism that comes across, or perfectionism or performanceism, right? And I've been at talks before where I'm in real time watching a snake oil salesman. And maybe that's jaded me a bit. I think I was a little bit jaded before that, but like I'm watching people. I did a talk where I was watching the organizers of said talk. It felt incredibly inauthentic. It made me incredibly uncomfortable because it was like I'm watching these people put on a show of what they think a self-help speaker is supposed to look like. And again, it's not everybody that I've ever encountered or worked with or whatever, but there was a couple in particular that I was like, bro, you are looking at this as your next business venture. You are putting on the costume of what a self-help speaker is supposed to do. You are doing your very best Tony Robbins impersonation. And it's not only cringy, and not cringy and like, oh, you're being so authentic, it's cringy. No, like cringy, like, bro, stop. Just stop trying to fucking play this character and just be you. But they're doing it with the intention of, this is going to get me paid speaking gigs. I'll become even richer. I could sell courses, which they already are. So I create this bullshit story, or if it's not even bullshit, but I exaggerate my story into being something so dramatic, or I exaggerate what I have figured out success-wise into being something so valuable that somebody's going to buy my program or invest with me, right? And like a lot of times they're talking about money. Like these guys in particular are like, how I became the first millionaire in my family. I don't know about y'all, but that's cool. But I have other things to worry about right now. Like, that's not that interesting to me. You becoming the first millionaire in your family. Tell me about your personal life. How is your personal life? Are you happy, sir? Right? Because your money is awesome. Cool. Money is great. We all need it. But if that's what you're leading with, that's the one thing you have to give to the world is like, I'm going to teach you how to be another rich guy. Something's off there. Or you're just like inauthentically screaming on the stage like you're Tony. Like I don't know, man. There's a lot of people performing, doing impressions of other people. That's what I'm saying. So to surmise all that I've been talking about here, you just got to be weary of this world that we're in. And I don't mean to be pessimistic or to fucking taint it for anybody, but a lot of people aren't who they say they are. It's the same shit with celebrity. We should never be propping people up as perfect. And anybody that sells you on the idea that they are perfect or they have it all figured out, run in the complete opposite direction of them. I guess that's my thoughts as well. And don't get me started on like the trend of like reposting quotes and things like that. And listen, I'm a quote junkie. I'll repost quotes all day, every day. But so many people don't realize it's more than just a quote that makes you feel validated in the moment. What do you do with that information? Dig deep, do the work. It's ongoing, never-ending work that sucks. It is painful, right? Just when you fucking think you've reached the mountaintop, you get thrown back down on the other side of the hill. That's what fucking self-help is in real, like in real practice. It's not sexy, right? Again, I've read all the fucking books, basically. I've done a lot of the work. I continue to do the work. I just crawled out of being like depressed for the last couple weeks, basically. Combination of being sick, but also being depressed. And I've done so much fucking work. And it continues. It's cycles. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. I don't have it figured out. I'm just talking to you honestly as a human being who's trying his best. Hopefully you get something out of it. But I'm doing this genuinely because this makes me feel good to know that I can connect with people and share this information. And I feel like when I see other people like this doing it inauthentically, I feel dirty for even just like associating myself in this world in general. And obviously these guys are far more successful than I am and have, far bigger followings, right? It's not like, we're being spoken about in the same breath or anything like that. But I just hate that they cheapen and taint something that I hold so dear to my heart and that I personally believe in so much. I think that's what my point is. And the way social media has watered it down so much that people think because they read a couple books that like, problem solved type of thing, or they post a quote, or they weaponize self-care just to be an asshole, basically. Like, oh, self-care is my get out of jail free card to be selfish and not value other people's time and energy. There's a lot of things that go along with that. I'm going to stop there because I could go on a tangent. I don't want to be negative, but I want to also share with you a bit of my personal journey and how I process all this stuff, right? Because I just gave you a half an hour of fucking me ripping into self-help. Let's talk about my own relationship with it as well. Was that our Mi Gente segment? Mi Gente! All right, so I know I took over that last conversation a little bit. It was supposed to be a deep dive on self-help industry, and then I made it about me a little bit. But I did want to go a bit deeper in this segment and just give you a bit about my background with self-help, my relationship with it, my thoughts, how I've arrived with the mindset that I have today, right? And for me, I've been into self-help since my late teens, early 20s. I was a depressed kid just trying to figure things out, right? And yeah, I didn't realize how long I've been on this journey until like recently. I was my parents called me basically like, hey, come pick up your shit in our basement or we're going to throw it out, basically. Anybody who's been out of the house for a little bit eventually gets that phone call where your parents are going to stop being your storage unit. So I had to go pick up some stuff and see what I wanted to throw away. And I found an old book that I had bought that was a self-help book. And it's not like one of the classics, not anything profound, I don't think. But I was really like blown away. I was like, man, I was really like invested in all the things that I'm doing currently. I was doing that years ago before I even really knew what to call it or sort of even knew I was on a journey, essentially, right? For me, that's probably why I have sort of this personal relationship and I feel so protective about self-help, as much as I hate that word, because at one point it was really all that I had, before I even started going to therapy, and took that journey. It was like all I had were these kind of books and these pieces of information and music from artists who expressed going through depression and things like that. That's all I had to sort of bring me comfort. And it comes from a very pure place for me of not only is this information incredibly helpful and useful for me in my life, but my want to share it is so ingrained in me because I don't want anybody to feel as alone as I did through some of those darker periods in life, right? Or the ones I still experience from time to time. You know, this is me giving back as much as I can. And I think that's sort of my own personal purpose, if you will, right? And why I really hold this stuff so dear to my heart. And it also, now having this journey within my culture, finding myself, you know, where I belong in my Latinness, right? In the BIPOC community. And having a level of awareness about many of the issues that affect us, many of the conversations that we're not a part of, I'm always sort of looking around in the rooms that I'm in now and saying, okay, who looks like me? Who looks like they're from my background, who could share my story, whose voice sounds familiar, right? And what I've found is a lot of times in this space, I'm one of the only people there. Sometimes in the literal sense in the room, or the figurative sense, I don't have many other places to go to hear this type of information, right? That's why I did, you know, sort of faithfully love podcasts like Lewis House's podcast, because even though I couldn't relate to this, you know, white guy who was a jock, the information, that was the only place I could get it from, right? And now everything's kind of been, because the internet, in a beautiful way, it's also diversified a lot. I now have a platform to kind of get through my own thoughts and interview people who I can gain information from, which is beautiful. But again, for a long time, I just sort of had to settle for what was available to me. What was actually really profound for me, I talk about the Hoffman process a lot, right? The personal growth retreat that I went away to, probably almost 3 years at this point, which is crazy. And I remember sitting there, looking around, and man, I am the only Latin person here. And there's not one black person here, aside from the people who worked there at like the bed and breakfast. There were Latin and black people who worked at the bed and breakfast. But in the actual room, getting this help or teaching me, I was the only Latin person. There was not one black person. Everybody, for the most part, were from wealthy backgrounds. Doctors, tech industry, finance. That was basically it. That rounded out everything, right? And I'd like to preface, I'm not judging or anything. These are beautiful people that were completely open to me. I love all those people, right? I have relationships with many of them that when we see each other, it's all love, and they're very supportive of me, right? So I'm not saying this in a negative way. What I'm saying is, though, obviously, somewhere along the way, the message didn't make it down to our community, right? Because this is an incredibly popular program in the world of self-help, in industries like tech. Many people, many entrepreneurs have gone through this program and rant and rave about how effective it is. So I begin to ask the question, how has it not reached our community? And I think much of the answers is sort of much of my gripe in general. It's the cost. At the time, I think it was like between $4,000 and $5,000 to do this retreat, which in comparison to $10K to sit in a conference room with a bunch of, with 1,000 other people is a bargain, because this was like 7 days of incredibly intense work, in the middle of the woods at a bed and breakfast in Connecticut, right? So it was a far more involved, program than just going to a conference room at a local hotel, Even with that, I remember decision that it felt like to make that sort of investment. And of course they have payment plans and things like that. But it was still a lot of money. It was like 2 payment plans, right? And the other thing I want to bring up, because I ended up doing this, because I mean at that time I definitely couldn't you have like some cash on hand, but it's like that's really like digging deep into my savings. I was trying to buy a house at that time too, but it was like that was one of my darkest, most depressed periods of my entire life. So it was like, bro, I need something drastic. Therapy's not working. The books, the podcasts aren't working. Like, people rant and rave about this shit. I gotta figure this out. And it felt like life or death almost, like dire, And to their credit, they offer a scholarship program. And I think the scholarship program is like half the price. So it was like $2,000. And you had to make under X amount of dollars in order to qualify for it. Luckily for me at that time, I did. And I was able to file for it. And was able to get in that way, right? And even at that time, $2,000 still felt like a hell of a lot of money. Shit, it still feels like that now. But I remember talking to like the person from like their registrar's office at this thing, and they were like, "You should apply for the scholarship." And what she told me, like, again, was one of those eye-opening things now in retrospect, where she said, because most of the time the scholarship goes unused, and now collecting all the information, why does it go unused? Because only a particular group of people are aware that this exists or are inquiring to find out more information. Only rich people, essentially, or well-to-do people who have money, are aware of this incredibly impactful program and have access to it financially, or feel like it's a realistic thing for them that they would even bother to inquire about, what payment options might be available. And that is really, I think, profound in what we're talking about. And I think why our community has been left out of these conversations. It's a lack of access to information. Also a lack of the finances needed to even be a part of a community of people that would be aware that something like this exists, right? Because again, it's incredibly popular amongst doctors, amongst the tech industry. Why is that? Because they're all doing it. They all have the means to do it. So they're having conversations amongst one another about it, and the information is spreading in their said communities. We don't come from backgrounds where our parents pushed therapy or self-help or, coaching programs. They weren't aware of it, and they didn't have the fucking means to do it. They probably believed it was like brujeria, right? So combined with all of that and not being financially able to be a part of these things, it didn't make its rounds in our community. And at the same time, the figureheads of said of these programs, of these movements, writing the books, putting out the motivational CDs and things like that, were white people, right? They didn't look like us, so we weren't paying attention as much because they weren't really speaking to us directly, right? And I think that is where a lot of the disconnect has happened. And for me, that is where I fall as like, man, I love self-help. It's resonated so much for me. I need to give this valuable information back to my community. And I'm trying to like explain my methodology. And maybe I'm also trying to like validate that I'm not one of these sort of snake oil salesmen, right? I'm trying to do so, I guess, subconsciously. And I'm trying not to sound like an infomercial for what I do as well. I'm just trying to like really give you insight into my head and into what I do. But like, that's really what the Just Be Social Club has become, is like, how do I give this information to people who look like me, who have maybe never been exposed or are looking for deeper connection within it, community, all of those things. How do I do it in a way where I don't become one of those people? This is my struggle. I guess this is what I'm trying to express. This is my struggle. How do I do it in a way where my time is being utilized well and I'm valuing it, but I don't want to become one of those people who makes it inaccessible to those who I feel like really need it the most. And that's what we've been struggling with. And I'll be completely honest and transparent. We did like the first mastermind group for the Just Be Social Club. It was free for a year. We would get together and like there was no charge whatsoever. It was just really giving back. And the second one, we did it at like I think it was $77 a month, and you get like one-on-ones and all these different things. And it's like I'm seeing the impact it's having on people's lives and things like that. And then meeting with other coaches and other people, we started drinking the sauce a little bit. I'll be 100%. The Kool-Aid was flowing. And we were like, oh, we're going to charge, whatever, $1,000 for it, for a couple months of it, blah, blah, blah. And I remember people were even like, that's too low. But I was like, $1,000, that's a lot of fucking money to be charging somebody who is just trying to get their shit together, And I think it was 1,000 or something like that, whatever it was. And I had to have my own reckoning where I was like, let's slow this ship down a little bit here. You are setting yourself up, even if people are willing to give you that money, you're setting yourself up to now be only speaking to a certain group of people. You are bringing yourself further away from your real purpose and intention by having that price point. And myself and Bren, who's my business partner and also a coach, we had to have that real conversation. What are we more invested in? Creating this business or really helping and speaking to our community and helping to create profound change in their lives? Which one are we really focused on? And obviously we came to the conclusion that we're really just trying to help our community. And then it says, okay, how do we do that in a way that is fair to us and our families and our obligations outside of this? How do we make sure that we are sort of honoring the time that's going to be invested in it, while also making sure that it is accessible to anybody who needs it and wants to be a part of it? And that's sort of the balance that we're at right now. And maybe this entire conversation that I'm having with you on this podcast is me talking to myself, and I don't know if it's justifying to myself or reminding myself that you are not one of those people. You are not the snake oil salesman. You are not trying to take advantage of people. Your heart is in the right place, and you're qualified to lead by example. And at the same time, your time is worth something. But you are doing everything from a purpose-driven place rather than a exploitative, monetary, business-driven place. Maybe I just need to get all this out of my head and journal it out verbally to remind myself of all that. I hope there's nobody disappointed. I just sat through whatever an hour of this just for him to have his own come to Jesus moment, but or to validate why he's not a snake oil salesman. I don't know. These are real thoughts, people. This is my real train of thought. But for me, I want to give everything I've ever been looking for. This is community. What we're doing, what we're trying to do, right? I want to give people access to potential collaborations. If you're a creative, you can collaborate with somebody, just bringing people together, creating this hub where we can all virtually meet up, talk about life, share experiences, share our journey, share the ups and downs, what's worked, what hasn't, give each other feedback in real time on our work, and be a positive force to help uplift each other when we need it, to connect people together who have like minds, who potentially can go off and build something together. That's what I'm trying to really bring actual value to our community, specifically speaking to BIPOC communities, people of color, right? That's sort of the work within this whole thing. As I'm already talking about, we're going to launch it in April. End of April is the goal for the next round of it. And of course, it's going to be accessible to everybody. Yeah, that's I guess where I am on it. And again, for me, it's Just Be is a passion project more than anything, And I will never say this is my business idea, my get rich business idea that I'm gonna, use as my means to live this sort of financially free life. No, it's just one of the things that I do that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I try to make sure that I'm valuing my time in the form of getting something out of it aside from the spiritual sense, but also getting something out of it for the hours that I'm putting into it. But again, it's like, I'm never gonna say, hey, me trying to be somebody's guru is, I'm the guy and this is my business and let me sell you, a bunch of bullshit things and all these things. I'm not gonna put that kind of pressure because I don't want to cheapen it. I think I'm just talking in circles at the end of the day. And I think one thing I want to end on this, right? One thing that's been really helpful for me in the self-help world, particularly when it was overrun by people who didn't look like you and I, white people, right? And I've always used this in anything, any sort of piece of information. It's a filter by which I listen and read with. I don't just take everything that they say or everything I hear or read and apply it to my life blindly. I take what resonates, I take what makes sense for me, and I filter out the rest, right? Whatever resonates, I listen. Whatever doesn't, I ignore. And that's why I say even somebody like Jay Shetty still has value for me. I can watch a clip on TikTok and take something from it if it's a message that touches where I'm at in my life or something I needed to hear or resonate with, right? But I'm not going to go beyond that, right? Because it just superficially resonates with me and I can move on to the next thing. Even with me, like, I never want anybody listening to what I do to sort of be like your Bible and be like, your rule of life, and you don't question anything I say. You don't question my methodology, because I'm constantly changing and adjusting. I'm giving you the information based upon who I am right now and what I think makes sense, but that could change tomorrow based upon new information that I get, new experiences. I'm constantly evolving and changing, just like anybody else. So, it takes critical thinking, it's just like the Secret, like the book and then the movie. It's like, if you just blindly like watch that and didn't have any critical thinking, you might be a little bit inspired, but like, you're not really getting practical advice. You kind of have to like read between the lines of what they're saying and what applies to you. It's like, yeah, I want $1 million. I'm not going to sit in my mailbox thinking that a check is going to come in for no reason, right? Like, that's just not how it works. I know, okay, I get the concept. I have to think it's feasible that I can actually make $1 million. So then now with that belief system, how can I create an idea that can eventually get me $1 million? Then that check comes in the mail, right? But it's a little bit of critical thinking, a little bit of action, a little bit of deciphering what's really being said, throwing away the fluff and getting to a place of what makes sense for you. I think that's what we have to look at when it comes to self-help, and not sort of just blindly follow everything and prop these people up as like holier than thou, and I think that's sort of the crux of it all. Now, with that said, I've talked a lot. Let's listen to you. What do you have to say about self-help, right? We'll get to that in our Ask a Gringo segment.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question. All right, so I simply asked people on my Instagram at DJ Dramos if you want to be a part of these conversations. And I simply asked, what are your thoughts on self-help? Good, bad, ugly? What have been your experiences? I'm going to read a few responses that I got. At Cali.boy.auth says, self-help media is great. Self-help guru sounds like a money grab. Like everything, just take it in moderation. I couldn't have said it better myself. The content is great. The information is great. The people, questionable. And you can't prop them up. And I love that. Just like anything else, take it in moderation. Take from it what makes sense for you, what you need, what feeds you in that moment. And that's it. Don't obsess, overthink things. Just get the value from it and apply it to your life. Take action. That's probably the most important part. Take action on the things that you're learning. At Miss Alex J says, I like self-help. Info is the same, but the way someone says it can hit differently. And yes, I love this as well. This sort of speaks to why it's important to have people who sort of speak your language, so to speak. That's kind of redundant right there. But it resonates a bit differently when somebody puts their own interpretation based on their own experience that might be similar to yours. And again, I think this is where people like Jay Shetty are impactful, right? Because he is this good-looking dude, right? He's got the suave accent, and I'm sure for a lot of people who are from his background, he's Indian, it's nice to see a different face. I mean, obviously, like the idea of Buddhism and monk culture and wellness have been long ingrained in Indian culture, but in the mainstream, again, it's people like Tony Robbins that have been propped up. So yeah, I think even for me, initially seeing somebody like Jay Shetty rise to this sort of level of being up there and his face being all over the place, it was a bit comforting to see a different type of face in there, or somebody speaking a bit more like a normal person, younger, those types of things. So yeah, it does hit differently from different people. And that's sort of what I'm talking about as well, where it's like, for me, that's why it's important to gain this information and not to hoard it, but to then share it with anybody who wants to hear it, because I know I have a way of delivering it that is going to be different than, Tony Robbins or whatever. I feel like I'm obsessing over this guy, but for the sake of example, so I definitely agree with that. At Emmy JM says, necessary evil at times, especially when people refuse to hear you or see you. Yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at it. Necessary evil. That's it. I think that really speaks to how inauthentic a lot of the content has become, that it feels like a necessary evil. But I get what you're saying, especially you said people don't hear you or see you. Yeah, I think for me, I grew up feeling like I wasn't being heard or seen, and hearing others share vulnerability or even just acknowledge that things like depression were real, or things that I was feeling were real, and giving advice on them made me feel comforted and I guess seen as a result. So even when I joked about like those quotes on social media that people will just haphazardly repost, sometimes that's just what you need, though, right? It's like, yeah, this is corny, and the person that posted it is an absolute mess of a human being, but that quote resonated with me in that moment, and I needed to hear, I don't know, a bit of inspiration about the struggle, right? To know that the struggle is a part of the process. I just needed that reminder today, right? So again, I think there's probably a part of us that are almost nauseated by being inundated with a lot of positive and self-help content. But once we get past the ick or the cringe, we're like, yeah, but this is actually really good fucking information as well, right? So it's like, maybe part of it is we're in our own way as well. We're overthinking it as a result of some of the characters within this world, if you will. But yeah, well said. That's it for our Ask a Gringo segment. Again, at DJ Dramos on Instagram, you want to be a part of these conversations. Now, with that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, I rambled for way too fucking long. I literally did not expect to get into this long of a conversation around this. But I guess I need to get some shit off my chest and speak to inner Dramos a little bit as well. And yeah, I don't know. I care about this stuff, man. It's like it's changed my life. This information has set me off on a journey that I know has redirected the course of my life, right? I look around at many people that I grew up with, and not to say that they're like, their lives are all in shambles or anything like that because they didn't get into self-help. But I look around and I'm like, man, my life is completely different than a lot of theirs because I went and dove into this information that at the time was considered weird or left of center or niche, right? I don't think I would be living the life that I'm living now if it wasn't for things like self-help. Because I think in those moments where I felt alone and unsupported, I was able to turn to that content, that information, those quotes, those books, and they gave me just enough fuel to keep on going, I think. That's incredibly important when you're doing hard work like healing or trying to believe in yourself or to get out of your own way. You just need those little pushes along the way. And for me, the self-help content stuff, the documentaries, it was all, I think, important parts of my story that kept me writing my story, if you will. So I am incredibly protective about it. I think I get a bit frustrated when you have people getting into this who are business first, help second. That mindset is, I think, what rubs me the wrong way. Because I know for me, I truly want to help people. And then it just creates this sort of weird dialogue of like, but am I one of these types of people now? You know, the people who are monetize the trauma of other people and stuff like that. I'm just giving you a really honest conversation when it comes to this stuff. Also, I don't want to see people getting taken advantage of. Also, I look around, I'm like, there's so much good information, even from the people that I'm critiquing, and it's not getting its way to our community, and that's frustrating to me. And just like I explained with that retreat I went away to, it's like, man, this hasn't gone to our community, hasn't reached us, and it's so fucking helpful. It's so profound. But because it's inaccessible, or because it's only popular amongst the privileged, it's not trickling its way down to those who really need it, or those who could really benefit from it in so many ways. And not to say, you know, people who have money don't have problems, but for me personally, I guess with my life's work, I look at my community, I'm like, man, this could be so huge for us if we collectively were adapting a lot of these ideas. I wish I had like a good like final sentence to really button this up, but I just wanted to, I don't know, share my thoughts on what's going on now, and hopefully remind everybody of why this stuff is so important, but also a reminder of like, don't idolize anyone, and don't feel like you are broken just because the work is ongoing for you, because you don't see a finish line in sight. Because what they don't tell you is there is no finish line. There is no get fixed quick scheme. This is life. It's ups and downs. You fall off the wagon, you get back on it. No matter how many books you've read, how much therapy, all these things, you're constantly learning, evolving, growing, failing, winning. It's ongoing. You're in pain. You're happy. It never ends. We're all on that journey together. And anybody who tries to sell you on anything otherwise is just full of shit at the end of the day. I guess that's my closing thought. With that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I will catch you on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Till then, stay safe and we will talk soon. Peace.